Welcome back. We've been bringing you live visuals of the protest action happening outside the International Convention Centre in Cape Town. And inside, of course, World Economic Forum Africa now well underway. A big focus on the possible benefits for South Africa and other African nations if this free trade area across the whole continent finally gets off the ground. Let's cross now to our anchor Nzinga Qunta, who's in Cape Town inside the ICC. Nzinga, tell us what's happening.
A very good afternoon. We are still coming to you live from the World Economic Forum in Africa. The meeting is taking place in Cape Town under the theme of inclusive growth and shared futures in the fourth industrial revolution. I'm now joined by our Minister of Telecommunications and Postal Services, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News, Minister. We've seen throughout the day women's issues being raised both inside this venue and outside with protesters. And we've also seen the ITU saying that women are going to get left behind in the fourth industrial revolution unless this bridge is divided. How does South Africa plan to do that?
Well, as South Africans, the first thing that we agreed on is that we need to ensure that there's digital inclusion. And therefore that says it doesn't matter who is out there. Despite the gender that is there, we've got to make sure that everybody is included. We come from a very painful past where we were discriminated because of the genders. And we said we're not going to allow this revolution to do that to us. As a result, in everything that we're doing, the president has given us a clear mandate to say, let 60% be women in terms of beneficiation, whether we're talking about scaling, whether we're talking about businesses, but most importantly, how do we make sure that we create an enabling environment for women to be able to occupy these positions, not just for them to be CEOs, but beyond them being CEOs, beyond them being board members or ministers, how do we make sure that they run the economy themselves? It is women that make budgets at home. It doesn't matter if they're working or not. It is women that know how to distribute the little resources that are there. But if we do not create platform, and I want to assure you of this, because there's this word that people like when we're getting women in the positions, they ask about capacity. There is no store that sells capacity for males. Therefore, there is no store that will sell capacity for women. Just like males are given an opportunity in this country, the women have to be given. And President Ramaphosa has made that very clear. Whether it's on policy, whether it's on regulation, we've got to change how we're doing things, and it has to look into the interest of women.
While we're discussing the fourth industrial revolution at the World Economic Forum, I know that you're also championing the fourth industrial revolution. A question that's been asked many times, and it may sound glib, is that if we can't even, as South Africa, deliver basic toilets in primary schools, how are we going to capacitate learners to learn in the fourth industrial revolution?
The problem, once more, is to want to say because you don't have access to a toilet, therefore you can't have access to technology. We are given an opportunity in South Africa to leapfrog, to say despite the challenges that we are having, here is an opportunity for us to utilize technology. And this technology that we're talking about, it's not technology that our people must only be consuming. We're calling for people, despite their geography, they have to be innovative. President Ramaphosa has called for us to make sure that in each and every town there's an innovation center. He has said there's a need for us to digitize education. As I'm speaking to you, we have engaged with all the operators that are in this country to say how do we make sure that with zero-rate data, because that's another cost that even if we were to provide devices and content to students in those rural areas, but if the cost to communicate is still high, it's not going to achieve. We have agreed that there's a need to prioritize education, and therefore the data must be zero-rated if it's in relation to education. But on top of that, you are engaging the OEMs to say, you've been in the country, you're making profits. We are a huge customer as government. How do we make sure that you give us discounts so that young people, despite their geography, whether they're learning from a tree or from a home, they must have access to education? Next year, we'll be launching a 100,000 online training program, and that is done here in this country to bridge the digital divide. And we are saying, as the people in the technology space, we've got to complement the work that is being done by Department of Education. You will agree with me. Education is spending a lot on the buildings, is spending a lot on security instead of the core business, which is education. Now we're coming to bridge that gap to say, let's complement. Of course, people are going to raise an issue. These children have never used a computer. Tell me who was born using a computer. Everybody uses a computer or a device because they were given an opportunity to. And that's the role we seek to play.
Okay. President Cyril Ramaphosa also spoke in a State of the Nation address about spectrum licensing. Explain to us what this is and how it's going to help in the drive towards ensuring South Africa doesn't get left behind in the fourth industrial revolution.
Well, one of the key things when we license spectrum is looking into the cost reduction, cost to communicate reduction. That is why when I issued the policy on the 26th of July, I had to look into a balanced view. What kind of society that do we want to build in South Africa? Do we want the South Africans to continue being consumers? Everybody's talking about spectrum, but we're not looking into the entire ecosystem. Spectrum goes with the device. Who produces this device? The software that is on your phone. Who produces it? And therefore, ours was to say, let's make sure that we come up with a policy direction that is accommodative, understanding that we have people who have already invested in terms of them being mobile operators that need to have access to spectrum, but at the same time addressing the imbalances of the past to say let's give an opportunity for transformation, and that we seek to say people of South Africa will not only consume, but they're given an opportunity to participate meaningfully in the rollout of spectrum. And that's what President Ramaphosa spoke about in his State of the Nation address. I know the question may be, Minister, you issued a policy direction, but you have not seen progress. Of course, once I issue a policy direction, it is now up to the regulator to kickstart the process. The Minister has written to the regulator to say, give us progress of how we have gone. And the regulator has informed the Minister that they are starting the directive, because also they do not want to be litigated when they take the matter to the public. They have to make sure that whatever process is followed and is within the law. And we are giving them that time to say that hopefully now by September, because we are running out of time. We have delayed South Africans from getting cheaper data costs. We've delayed the industry from being innovative and investing in infrastructure. Therefore, the regulator is aware of that, and we really do not have time. We're waiting for them to pick up their strokes and then start with the journey.
Speaking of something that hasn't made progress, at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, the SABC board chair, Bongomusa Makatini, said that he believes that the SABC is not getting a cash injection because there's an attempt to try and move the public broadcaster away from its stance of being independent and impartial, and there's what he may believe to be political interference at play with the SABC not receiving funds. What's your response to that?
Well, what the chairperson of SABC said to the Zondo Commission is what I will be responding to formally. So please follow us. We'll be making our presentation to the Commission, and there we'll clarify and explain our side of the story.
So there is no political interference?
I wouldn't comment on that. Hence, I'm saying I will respond. That's a matter that was raised in the Commission. I don't want to be seen as if I'm undermining the platform that Zondo is leading.
Okay, let's come back to the World Economic Forum now. There's young women protesting outside about issues of not being included. You've spoken about inclusivity. We've seen the body of Uyinene Mrwetyana found in Cape Town last week. There's also a response that perhaps government is not being responsive enough. And I know that it's not something that falls directly under your portfolio, but if we could comment from that on you.
Well, actually it does fall under my portfolio. I'm a woman. I'm a leader in the country. Therefore, the interests of women or the issues of women affect me directly, which is why as the department we have called, because the Uyinene that we're talking about has been murdered or allegedly murdered by the person who's working for us in the post office. That's why we called for an investigation to say, if this man was found guilty on two fronts, how did we then continue to have him? I know the public there and the legal people are busy saying this minister is contradicting the laws of the country. But right now, this minister is speaking as a woman to say if there's a law that has justice, it has to protect the women of this country. We should not be apologetic about that, because men are able to pay for legal fees and they win cases. It doesn't mean we must be victims. But on top of that, government and the president has announced very clearly that the Department of Justice will be looking into the matter. And just besides that, the policies that we are trying to put in place and the support, was one of the things that we've been doing is to want to make it a nice thing. It's a woman that has been raped, but we don't name and shame. Here is the time that we must name and shame all the perpetrators. Here is the time that as government we must take a stance to say we're going to have a gazette or a register of all those that have committed sexual offenses. And as government, we really have to do something. If we don't do it, the public must act.
How long do you think it's going to take to go from the process of saying government must act to actually implementing and preventing further deaths from happening?
Well, government is implementing. I didn't say they have not started. Government is implementing. Government has structures in place. But as I'm saying, government is not going to be able to do it alone. Hence, I'm calling upon everybody to take charge. Reality, Nzinga, between me and you as women, is that I don't think this is the time that we must trust other people with our lives. We've got to fight like the elder women did, those that came before us. If government, we feel like government is not doing enough, we've got to show them what needs to be done without taking the law into our hands. And that's the call I'm making as a woman before I'm a minister.
Let's come back to your role at the World Economic Forum, Minister. What kind of discussions are you having and planning to have with the different participants here? And if you could narrow it down to us, 2 to 3 areas of focus that you would particularly like to leave with after this conference.
Well, key things that the engagements that we're having is that we're calling for people to invest in our country, especially on the area of startups. How do we learn with other countries? Right now, I'll be meeting the minister from Sweden because they're doing very well in terms of having a very high-rated startup. On top of that, we are discussing the issues of digital transformation. How do we learn from each other? But most importantly, how do we position South Africa to take that leadership role in Africa? Of course, there are people already that are saying Kenya is doing well, Rwanda is doing well. We fully agree they're doing well, but we believe that in South Africa we can do better without competing, but complementing the work that is being done by Rwanda, Kenya, and other countries. Ours for Africans is to say we've got to stop competing against each other. We've got a market of 1.2 billion that the fourth industrial revolution relies on. It doesn't matter if you come from the east, it doesn't matter if you come from the west, all of them, they want to come to Africa. How do we use that opportunity as Africans in terms of deriving our own value to say, yes, we don't have access to technology. Yes, we're still talking about the infrastructure, but most importantly, we are wiser. We know what needs to be done, and therefore this is how it must be done, and we provide solutions. So that's what we are looking for as the department in this WEF.
Thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Telecommunications and Postal Services Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams sitting here speaking to us at the World Economic Forum meetings that are taking place in Cape Town. We'll continue to keep you updated throughout the day, tomorrow and on Friday, on what's taking place, decisions that have been made, and the meetings that are taking place. With that, it's back to you in studio.